We've noticed more and more that FORS operators are being asked for EcoVadis, and not just as a nice to have, but a way to win and to retain work. And many operators are surprised about how much evidence they actually already have because of FORS without even realizing it. And what we're going to cover today, we're going to start by explaining what EcoVadis actually is, and importantly, what it's not. Then we're going to break down some of the scary terminology around Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions in plain English and not sustainability jargon. And then the most valuable part of today is about connecting EcoVadis back to FORS and about how you can prepare for its successful submission. So what is EcoVadis? So understanding EcoVadis, it's an increasingly being driven by customer procurement teams. And this isn't optional anymore. It's becoming part of winning and retaining those contracts. We're seeing it in tender requests more often than not. Emissions data and GHG accounting and underpin a lot of the environmental score, but doesn't mean that you need perfect data. EcoVadis looks for direction of travel, the controls and improvement. It's not about perfection, it's about the journey you're on. And with FORS, you've already got that platform. EcoVadis is the next step. So this is a really important point here. EcoVadis does not expect you to be a sustainability leader on day one. They assess your policies, like what is your intent? They look at your actions. Are you doing something practical? And the results, they want you to not just say it, not to have intent, what actions are you implementing, but what results are you getting from that? So the Global Sustainability Ratings platform is used by customers and procurement teams, and it assesses those policies, actions, and outcomes, and as I said, not perfection. And it's covered over 4 themes on EcoVadis. So that would be environment, labour and human rights, ethics and sustainable procurement. So customers are asking for EcoVadis, but why are they doing it? We've got 2 very large companies right now, and that's Amazon and Royal Mail. And within their tender process, they are requesting that you have an EcoVadis scoring. And they're doing that because they need to manage their supply chain risk at scale. And it's used to allow them to gauge where you are on your sustainability journey. Like, how serious are you with sustainability? And what have you already embedded into your business? And do you even know your risks and opportunities? It's also about, legal compliance, reputation protection, transparency. And FORS already gives you credibility in a high risk transport activities, which customers value. And Amazon and Royal Mail during these tender requests, they need to know this data to move you forward. Now, decoding the terminology. So before we go any further, I just want to level set on a few terms you'll keep seeing within EcoVadis. And this slide is about what they mean at a high level. I'm going to go a bit deeper on the next few slides. So materiality, that focuses on what really matters within your operations. GHG accounting 1, 2, and 3, and that's understanding where your emissions and impacts come from. And then ESG, everybody hears it, but that's how a business manages environmental, your people, your human capital, and how you manage your governance risks. So materiality, this is a word and it comes up a lot in sustainability and EcoVadis, but the idea itself is actually quite straightforward. Materiality simply means focusing on what is relevant. In other words, the sustainability issues that matter most for your operation and your customers. So EcoVadis is not expecting fleet operators to understand and address every possible ESG topic that's out there. But what it wants to see is, have you identified where your biggest impacts and risks sit? And the most common sort of material topics tend to be very practical and operational. They would usually include fuel use and emissions, vehicle and driver safety, legal and regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, supply chain responsibility, such as subcontractors or suppliers. And the important thing here is that these align very closely with what FORS already asks you to manage. Now that we're clear on what materiality means, the next step is to understand one of those material topics in more detail, and that's emissions and how EcoVadis will look at scope 1, 2, and 3 in practice. So GHG emissions, if I can say it right. This slide looks complicated at first glance, but the message behind it is actually very simple. It's about understanding what you control. What do you buy? What do you influence? So scope 1, that's direct emissions. So scope 1 emissions are the ones you directly control. So for fleet operators, this is mainly fuel burned in your vehicles and any on-site fuel use such as heating or gas. And the good news is that that's usually your strongest because you're already tracking fuel, mileage, and fuel performance. Scope 2 covers purchased energy. So that covers emissions from the energy you buy, electricity. This might be electricity used in your offices, depots, or even warehouses. And you don't need to emit it directly, but by using the energy, you are responsible for it. So even simply, electricity data is usually enough for EcoVadis and yourself at this stage. And then scope 3, that's indirect emissions. So that's upstream and downstream, and that is everything else. The emissions you don't control directly, but you can influence. And this is split into two areas, upstream and downstream. Upstream, this is things that happen before your operation, like the suppliers and contractors. And downstream, this is things that happen at your service, such as products or services are used. And this is where people often worry, but it's important to say clearly, EcoVadis expects understanding and prioritization, not a full calculations or GHG inventory. So most of you will already have been started by fully covering scope 1. You may be partially covering scope 2, sorry, and you would have identified some of your relevant scope 3 areas. And this is completely expected and acceptable. And to make scope 3 clearer, the next slide breaks it down into the official categories, and we can talk about which ones usually matter for fleet operators. So scope 3 categories, there's 15 of them. They might look slightly overwhelming, but the key point is that not all of these are relevant to your business. On the left here, 1 to 8, upstream categories. These are the things that happen before or around your core operations. So for operators, the most common and relevant upstream categories tend to be purchased goods and services, such as fuel, tyres, subcontractors, fuel and energy use in related activities. And then you've got the upstream transportation and distribution, waste generated in operations, and business travel and employee commuting. These are where most already have some data or controls. And then to the right, we've got downstream categories. So these relate to what happens after your service or activity. For many FORS operators, several of these may not be material or not applicable, but EcoVadis is perfectly comfortable with you stating this category is not relevant to our operation at all, and here is why. Because transparency scores better than we think it, or it's guesswork. Now, and that's where the materiality comes back in, because you are not being scored on how many scope 3 categories you do report. You're being scored on whether you've thought about them, identified what's relevant, and been honest about what you can influence. So for me, with scope 3, the key takeaway is scope 3 is actually a journey. It's not a starting point. EcoVadis wants to see that you're aware of your wider impact and you're taking logical first steps, and not that you've solved everything, because you can't do every single scope 3 category. Now, ESG, just to give you a brief overview. So E stands for environment, and for you on the call, that could be fuel use, emissions, energy waste. And what does the S stand for? Well, this is about people. That's your driver welfare, your safety, your training, and that's got a strong alignment with FORS too. And governance. Well, this is where things tend to sort of fall down, and that's your policies, your procedures, and accountability and your ethics. And this is where many, especially in the transport sector, are doing the right things, but potentially not structuring it or documenting it correctly. Now, how can we connect EcoVadis to what you're already doing for FORS? This is how you're already supported in EcoVadis. So the environmental foundation of EcoVadis is already covered. You're already checking your fuel efficiency and your emissions monitoring. You're already looking at low emission vehicles, your air quality focus, operational environmental policies, and all of this supports EcoVadis with the environment and the actions and the KPIs. Health and safety. So your driver training competency, your risk assessments, incident reporting, your working time and fatigue management, all of that supports the labour and human rights side of EcoVadis. And then you go over to your data, the evidence and the governance. So audited processes and your KPIs, your continuous improvement model, documented policies and procedures, all of those will align with EcoVadis for the evidence-based scoring. So for the clear ESG progression, the FORS transport focus, operational ESG, translate is EcoVadis is where you already are. You've already got a platform of maturity, and your FORS evidence shortens your EcoVadis journey because you're already at a good starting point. Now, to prepare for a successful submission, we've created a flipbook guide for you. If you scan the QR code on the screen, that will give you a good idea of exactly what documents EcoVadis would be expecting to see on your first submission. The EcoVadis journey is a 5-step journey, and that goes from you register with the platform with EcoVadis, you fill in a tailored to you questionnaire, it then goes through an expert analysis, they then give you your results, and then you can share your results, your badge, or whatever status you are when you finally completed it. And you do that on an annual basis. If anybody needs the QR code or anything afterwards, please let us know, or Holly may be able to help you with the QR code as well. So, what are the common challenges with EcoVadis? So, people have limited internal resources. There's EcoVadis preparation competes with your daily operations, unclear methodology, so uncertainty about what counts as valid evidence and how that scoring actually works. Tight submission deadlines. So if you've been asked by a tender, you might want to speed up the EcoVadis process. Preparation and coordination across teams can become quite overwhelming. Pressure for a certain score or medal. So you could have expectations from management or customers to say, I expect a certain level. They could say, you want bronze or we need silver. Um, and the slow EcoVadis Help Centre loops, and that really can delay the platform access and the responses that you really need from them. So your next practical steps, I suggest that you map what are you already doing. Fill in the key gaps for environmental, labour and human rights, your ethics and sustainable procurement policies. Implement your actions. Really plan on doing something year and year with an improvement plan in place. And then if you're struggling or you need support with EcoVadis, get some support in place. It's really important for you. And the journey goes from committed all the way through to platinum. My closing thought here on this short webinar today is you do not need to start from scratch. Most of you already have some really strong foundations in place for EcoVadis, and the key is connecting existing practices into a structured sustainability framework. And I refer back to our previous webinar. It has been recorded. You do have access to that as well. And that gives you a bit more of an oversight on EcoVadis and the steps in there as well.